Chairman, members of the Presidential Task Force, ladies and gentlemen of the press, good afternoon. Before I go through the details of the lockdown protocol, I would like to first of all start by talking about our donors, particularly those that have been helping in the distribution of palliatives and those that have contributed in significant amounts for the fight against COVID. First of all, I would like to continue to encourage donors to ensure the safe distribution of palliatives across the country. It is particularly important that donors ensure strict physical distancing, ensure that their personnel are trained on basic health and safety protocols. This will stop us from having situations where we are potentially putting persons at risk of transmission of COVID. From the point of view of persons that are positive for COVID, again, I would like to urge these persons to please present themselves to clinical setups. The key symptoms are fever, which occurs in about 80 to 90% of cases, a cough, which happens in about 2/3 of cases, and a shortness of breath. There are other unusual symptoms, such as loss of smell and taste, associated with cold-like symptoms. In these situations, it's particularly important that we take measures to move persons out of the communities and into care so that they can be looked after properly. We need to take a personal responsibility of our health, but we also need to take responsibility for the health of our communities. I would like to, before I go on, I would like to acknowledge the contributions of the following: MTN, UBA, Friesland, Union Bank, Food Relief Fund, and the Ansaruddin Society. We're very grateful for your support. In terms of the details of the lockdown protocol, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation has already outlined some of the guidelines we have in place that haven't really changed remarkably. And I think the most important thing I wanted to emphasize is, even though we talk about easing the lockdown, in actual fact, we're not really easing. We are just shifting from one set of interventions to another, because we are really still far from controlling this epidemic, and we need to continue to work hard, all of us, to make sure that the pandemic resolves. So, first of all, the issue of curfew. Effective from the 4th of May, as Mr. President announced, there will be an imposition of overnight curfew nationwide from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. General movement outside the curfew periods, people may go out for work, to buy necessary food, and for exercise, but we are strongly advising persons to restrict themselves to their local government areas, except for those that live in metropolitan areas where this will be very difficult, unless, of course, you are going out for critical reasons such as healthcare and work. For interstate travel is restricted to only those involved in the supply chain and services such as goods, agricultural products, petroleum products, courier services, relief items, etc., and we'll provide that detail. From the point of view of intrastate, that is within state borders, there are certain aspects that will apply across the board. One is to ensure that all, whether you are businesses or you are transport companies, etc., you make sure that you provide hand sanitizers to your customers. Any person going into the public will be expected to use non-medical face masks. We will introduce temperature checks. We will ensure that respiratory hygiene is followed, and in general, the restriction of mass gatherings to not more than 20 persons. In addition to this, from the point of view of agriculture and rural development, companies involved in food processing can commence operation. In construction sites, critical roads will be allowed. Construction of critical roads will be allowed, but waivers will be provided by the state governments to enable movement. For the manufacturing and pharmaceutical industries, we will encourage shift work and limiting staff to only 30 to 50% to maintain social distancing. And pharmacy shops may remain open overnight. Banks will be allowed to open, but there will be restriction in the opening hours to between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m., together with all the other preventive measures I have already mentioned. For government offices, government staff will be allowed to resume from the 4th of May, but it will be based on specific grade levels and specific days so that we can reduce the amount of congestion that we might have in our government offices. And we will be discussing further with state governments to make sure that we have a common approach to this. Neighborhood markets will continue to open with the same standard restrictions that we have applied in the past, as well as supermarkets and retail stores. Restaurants will not open to the public, but will be allowed to engage in home delivery of food. Academic institutions and social engagements, schools will remain closed till further evaluation. Schools are encouraged to continue with e-learning and virtual teaching. Social activities such as the use of recreational parks, communal sports, concerts, social parties, and movie theaters will be suspended until further review. There will be other general pieces of advice. So, for instance, discouraging persons above the age of 65 and those with comorbidities from commingling with the general public so that they protect themselves from catching COVID, because they're the ones that are most likely to develop severe illness. We will be providing additional details. Hopefully, the implementation guidelines and the protocols will follow over the next day or two to allow businesses and offices to prepare for these changes. Thank you very much.